If you're not a Christian, I think this still is a very helpful framework, because when we're talking about money, we're talking about much more than dollars and cents. We're talking about how to solve life problems with financial vehicles and resources, whether that's sending kids to college or leaving an inheritance or retirement.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Darryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Darryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of Pax Financial Group, and thanks for tuning in to Retire in Texas. This information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific tax, investment, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. So I want to make sure that you go to our website from time to time. We have some ebooks on there, and grab some of those ebooks to digest content, because I can only give you kind of high level stuff through a 15 to 20 minute podcast. Now, you may or may not have caught this, but generally speaking, this podcast is going to have content that is in the financial planning space. So I'll cover whether it's estate planning or taxes. I stay a lot in the markets because I need to keep you abreast of the markets. I will also do this in such a way that I look at life through a biblical worldview. I don't feel comfortable expressing my faith so overtly, because I want to make sure you focus on some of the very salient tactical stuff. But whenever scripture guides my thought, I do share it with you unapologetically. I just don't feel like I have to preach. I just do it in an authentic fashion. Finally, you'll see that I don't use a lot of numbers. Everything that I say is supported by data, and so that's put in the show notes. People often tell me I dumb things down for them, but basically what I've done is not interjected a bunch of facts and figures that confuse people. I just generally don't use a lot of that in a 15, 20-minute podcast. So those are three elements to consider. It's going to be financial planning related, coming at life through a biblical worldview, not using a lot of numbers. All supported by research and facts, because that's particularly wired. But that's the format of this. And if you find it to be helpful, then please share it with others, as I am getting incredible feedback that this podcast is doing its job by serving people. And in the midst of this noise, we just need something that makes a little bit more sense, rational sense. This particular podcast, as much as I'd like to talk about Target and how their stock continues to decline, I say that tongue in cheek. I know why they're declining. I don't think the market likes to talk about why they're declining. Maybe we'll talk about that here soon. And that's a little teaser. I have 3 or 4 really cool podcasts right around the corner that I'm just really excited to share with you. But right now, I'm going to talk about 8 considerations when you're hiring a financial advisory firm that you have to consider. Specifically, if you're thinking about how that advisory firm aligns with your values, your Christian values. If you're not a Christian, I think this still is a very helpful framework, because when we're talking about money, we're talking about much more than dollars and cents. We're talking about how to solve life problems with, financial vehicles and resources, whether that's sending kids to college or leaving an inheritance or retirement. The person that's giving you advice, if they have a complete disconnect from your worldview, it makes it difficult. And so in today's polarizing environment, we need to just take inventory of what is the marketplace doing to accommodate people with different life views. And I'm finding that these institutions are having a hard time, or will have a hard time, I'll say it that way, being everything to everyone. So I have 8 salient points that I think you have to consider when working with, I wouldn't say a banking institution, that's very transactional, but any institution that's pouring into your life and giving you wisdom or advice or knowledge or information that's going to guide your future. You have to think about, is that advice aligned with my values? So if you're a Christian, I think the first one is, does that financial institution honor my Christian values? This is actually becoming an issue in the marketplace. You can look this up. This is public information. Bank of America recently suspended an account for a missionary group in Uganda. I think it was called the Indigenous Group. I know I'm not getting that name 100% right, for no reason whatsoever. And so that's happened at other big institutions before. We've seen it. The headlines are clear. No reason or rationale. So there are many financial institutions that are targeting Christians. It's the saddest and most peculiar thing at the same time. I mean, Bank of America, very large institution, owns Merrill Lynch and a lot of people depending on that institution for financial advice, and they love taking the Christians' money and on the other hand, attacking them. And so this is happening. If you want to look it up, you can look up on Alliance Defending Freedom's website and push back, question your institution. Are they honoring or in fact dishonoring Christian values? Number 2, does my financial institution offer biblical responsible investing? I actually worked with one of the largest financial institutions in the world. I was working with them on a project, and I tried to convince them that they need to reconstruct their focus to accommodate the Christian marketplace. I was trying to make the case that there's a business opportunity for them in the Christian marketplace, but they didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was trying to get them to adopt biblical responsible investing. They did not want to have anything to do with biblical responsible investing. There's a lot of institutions out there that will not allow biblical responsible investing. If your financial institution that you're getting advice from isn't offering biblical responsible investing, I think it begs the question, is there a specific reason why or why not? Number 3, does your financial institution offer Christian donor advised funds? Donor advised funds are a way for you to give to a specific type of an account where then your donation to the charity is anonymous. This is very helpful as the dollars get bigger. And it's very helpful because if your donations are made public, in some instances, some very spiteful groups will try to find the list of donors and attack them, undermine them, or harass them. Focus on the Family is a great example. The Southern Poverty Law Association states that the Focus on the Family is a hate group because of their stance on traditional marriage and the nuclear family. So as a result, some donor advised funds have considered no longer allowing distributions or making distributions from a fund to Focus on the Family public, subjecting them to harassment. I don't think anything's been adopted. I think there's been dialogue, but nothing's been adopted here. But I prefer to work with donor advised funds that are used for charitable giving. I prefer them to remain anonymous. And in order to do that, I like working with donor advised funds that are Christian donor advised funds, that their focus is working with the Christian community. Number 4, will my financial institution advocate for religious freedom? We all have a voice as individuals, but these institutions also have a voice, and a very powerful one. And many of them are using profits, company profits, to support legislation, specifically the Equality Act. And you can look at that and make a judgment call yourself. But the Equality Act does have, at first glance, seem to be a very encouraging way for everybody to participate in this American experiment, which is nothing wrong. But the consequences of religious freedom are a threat by the current adoption of the Equality Act. I don't think there's a doubt about it, because if you express your conviction for having a dad in the house in a church, according to the Equality Act, you could be subject to fine or sanctions. So having a financial institution that you're working with that's using their profits to support that, that's in conflict with your deeply held convictions. So that's often done at a voting level at shareholder meetings, and it's called proxy voting. And so when I say, does your financial institute advocate for religious freedom? Are they participating in these proxy votes? And if so, are they voting for religious freedom or against religious freedom? And that actually includes not just Christians, but all types of religious organizations. Number 5, does my financial institution discourage excessive debt? You know, Dave Ramsey is obviously the champion here, but if you look at the Word of God, when it comes to the Christian faith, debt is discouraged. The borrower is the slave to the lender. We all find ourselves in debt to a certain degree, especially when we're buying houses or cars. But the idea behind the Christian attitude is that you're not going to stay in debt very long. You're going to try to remove that debt. So working with an institution that encourages a lot of debt is, you got to take inventory of how that conflicts with your values. Number 6, does my financial institution think about legacy from a biblical perspective? I've said this before. You've probably heard me say this. An inheritance is what you leave to someone, but a legacy is what you leave in someone. And so leaving a legacy is really, really a sacred thing when it comes to a Christian worldview. And the idea of leaving an inheritance to your children's children or a legacy to your children's children is much more than just leaving money. It's a transference of those values and those sacred principles. When you think about the institution that's giving you advice, are they dissecting the sacredness of how you leave money to the next generation? Sure, every institution will suggest that you do a will, But does the institution actually walk down the conversation and say, how does this impact the next generation? And should we consider a charitable component to this legacy that you're leaving? Two more. My financial institution is open to Christian health insurance alternatives. The marketplace offers an alternative to traditional healthcare, and traditional healthcare has been very expensive for the middle class, but the insurance alternatives of Samaritan Ministries and MediShare, they do have a place, and it's all rooted in the idea that we'll share each other's burdens. I find the premiums to be so reasonable. They're still expensive, but compared to traditional health insurance, and I think financial institutions should not discount that being a good alternative for many Christian families. If a financial institution says that's silly, that's dumb, I don't think it makes sense, then I think you should double check on the financial institution you're getting advice from, because this Christian sharing alternative has about a 30-year track record of success, not perfect, but worthy of consideration. I can testify to that personally. And finally, does my financial institution create a picture of retirement differently than the world? When it comes to retirement, by definition, retirement is the disposal of an asset when it's no longer useful. So I wouldn't suggest, and I don't think really any financial institution would suggest that your life's no longer useful. But according to a biblical worldview, the only really suggestion of retirement in the Bible is when God actually decided for Moses, told him, you're getting a little, and I'm paraphrasing here, this is kind of Darryl's version, you're getting a little too old for this work, you need to hand it over to the Levite. He told this to a bunch of people, but specifically Moses. And, really wasn't about, Moses and this group of people no longer working and sitting around with Fox News and flower beds for the rest of their lives. He was just saying, look, you're getting a little old. It's time to pivot. It's time to do something different. And the reality is life is so precious that when you're older and you still have breath in your lungs, God still has a purpose for you. And so it's time to, in most cases, reach down to the next generation and grab their hand and try to pull them up, given the fact that you have wisdom, hopefully, life experience, time now, and maybe some money. So when you think about retirement from a biblical worldview, it's much more than just, like I said, Fox News and flower beds. And so anybody suggesting that you deserved it, you earn it, I think there's elements of that. But if that's the main priority, I think we're missing a boat from a biblical worldview. It's much more than that. And it's much more precious than that. So those are the 8 salient points when it comes to taking inventory of the financial institution that's giving you advice and asking yourselves, are they aligned with the Christian worldview? Which, remember, Christians in the early days were people of the way. There was a different way of doing things. And so there still is a different way of doing things with your money. There's 2,000 scriptures regarding money, so there's very much a different way of doing things. And sometimes it gets kind of lost in the chaos of our American consumerism. But I'm trying to tell you, hey, when you're working with your financial institution, they're giving you very, very important advice. You got to ask yourselves, is there alignment of values? And that's, I know I've told you this in other podcasts before, but just double clicking on it, making sure it just really gets reinforced. And, it is, to a certain degree, it's self-serving, but if you find another institution that has these qualities, or at least the majority of them, you're probably going to be in good hands. And of course, PAX checks all these boxes. That's why we're doing what we're doing. We check all these boxes because we want to build it out in such a way that Christians can feel that there's not a misalignment. So there's the 8 bullet points on considerations when you're hiring a financial institution to give you advice. Hope it's helpful. Hope you noodle on it and chew on it a little bit more. And as always, as we navigate these crazy times, I want to remind you, you think different when you think long-term. Have a great day.